My son blocked the doorway and yelled, "This is my wife's family dinner. You're not invited anymore." I turned around without a word. 2 weeks later he was standing outside my new place, with tears in his eyes. What I did in those 2 weeks broke him. Family story. I still hear the sound of that doorframe under his hand. The way the wood creaked when he leaned his weight into it like he was barricading a fortress. My son Connor stood there in the soft yellow porch light of the house I had helped him buy, the same house where I had painted the nursery walls when his first baby was on the way. Behind him the dining room glowed with candles and the low murmur of voices that did not include me. His wife Megan's parents, her sister, her brother-in-law, people whose last names I had only learned at the wedding 3 years earlier. "This is my wife's family dinner," he said again, louder, like he needed the whole street to hear it. "You're not invited anymore." I had a casserole dish in my hands. Chicken and wild rice, the one his father used to ask for every Sunday. The foil was still warm against my palms. I looked at Connor's face and saw nothing of the boy who used to wait for me at the end of the driveway after school. Something in his eyes had gone flat and careful, the way a man looks when he has already decided which side he is on. I set the dish down on the concrete step. I did not raise my voice. I did not ask why. I simply turned around, walked back to my car under the street lamp, and drove away while the autumn leaves skittered across the road like they were trying to follow me. That was a Tuesday evening in late October. By the time I reached the quiet cul-de-sac where I still lived in the house my late husband and I had bought 31 years earlier, the sky had gone the color of wet slate. I sat in the driveway for a long time with the engine off and the casserole cooling on the passenger seat. Connor had been pulling away for months. Little things at first. Missed calls. Short answers when I asked about the grandchildren. Megan's voice in the background telling him they were busy with family plans. I had told myself it was just the season of young marriage, the natural tightening of a new circle. I had told myself a lot of things that were no longer true. The next morning I woke up and the house felt different. Not smaller. Just emptier in a way that had nothing to do with square footage. I made coffee the way I always had and stood at the kitchen window watching the neighbor's golden retriever chase a tennis ball across the lawn. Mrs. Callahan waved from her porch. I waved back and then closed the curtain. I spent that first day in a kind of quiet inventory. I walked through every room and looked at the furniture as if I were seeing it for the first time. The dining table where Connor had done his homework. The hallway where his height mark still climbed the doorframe in faded pencil. The guest room that had become a storage space for the toys the grandchildren left behind on the rare weekends they stayed overnight. By Thursday I had called a realtor named Patricia Lang whose yard sign I had seen 2 streets over. She came in the afternoon with a tablet and a polite smile that did not ask too many questions. We walked the house together. She talked about comparable sales and curb appeal and the strong market for 3-bedroom colonials in this part of Oak Ridge. I nodded and signed the listing agreement on the kitchen counter while the late sun came through the blinds and thin gold bars. That same afternoon I drove to the bank. I had kept a joint savings account open with Connor's name still on it from the years when he was first starting out and needed help with the down payment. It had sat mostly untouched except for the birthday deposits I made for the kids. I closed it. The teller printed a cashier's check for the remaining balance and I placed it in my purse without looking at the amount. Friday I met with my attorney, an older man named Gregory Ellison who had handled the paperwork after my husband passed. His office smelled of paper and lemon polish. I told him I wanted a new will. I wanted the house, once sold, and the rest of what I had, directed elsewhere. Not to charity. Not yet. To people who still answered the phone when I called. My sister in Colorado. My niece who sent handwritten cards every Christmas. A scholarship fund at the community college where Connor had once taken night classes before he decided he was too busy. Gregory took notes without comment and said the documents would be ready by the following week. I did not cry in his office. I cried later, in the car, parked behind the grocery store with the radio off. The second week moved faster. Patricia called with an offer on the 6th day. Cash, quick close, no contingencies. The buyers were a young couple from out of state who wanted to be in before the holidays. I accepted. The inspection happened on a gray morning while I sat on the back deck drinking tea and watching a pair of squirrels argue over the bird feeder. I signed the papers in Patricia's office on a Wednesday afternoon. By Thursday, the movers had come and gone. Most of the furniture went into storage. A few boxes of photographs and the quilt my mother had made rode with me to the small one-bedroom apartment I had found on the other side of town, near the Riverwalk and the old library. The apartment smelled of fresh paint and new carpet. The windows looked out over a quiet parking lot and a row of bare maple trees. I unpacked the kettle first. Then the coffee mugs. Then the framed picture of Connor at age 7 holding a baseball trophy, the one where his front teeth were missing and his grin was wide enough to split his face. I set it on the windowsill and left it there. I did not tell Connor where I had gone. I changed my phone number. I redirected the mail. I stopped answering the few messages that still came through the old email address. The silence felt heavy at first, like carrying something that kept shifting its weight. Then it settled into something closer to stillness. On the 14th evening, I was heating soup on the small stove when the intercom buzzed. I almost ignored it. The building was quiet and I had not ordered anything. When it buzzed a second time, I pressed the button. A voice I knew better than my own said my name. I walked down the single flight of stairs and opened the outer door. Connor stood under the weak light of the entryway. His coat was open. His hair looked like he had driven with the windows down. His eyes were red and swollen in a way I had not seen since the night his father died. He tried to speak and the words caught. He looked past me into the narrow hallway of the building as if he expected to see the old house somehow folded inside these walls. "Mom," he said finally. I went by the house. "There's a sold sign. The locks are changed. Your number doesn't work." I waited. He swallowed. "Megan's parents asked where you were at dinner last week." I didn't know what to tell them. Then I started calling and no one answered. I went to the bank. The account's closed. I talked to Mr. Ellison's office. They said the will was updated. His voice cracked on the last word. I stood there with the door half open and the October wind pushing cold air around our ankles. He looked smaller somehow, standing on the concrete step of a building that did not belong to either of us. "I didn't know you would actually leave," he said. "I thought you would just be angry for a while and then it would go back." I watched his face the way I used to watch it when he was little and trying to explain a broken window or a failed test. The same searching look. The same hope that the right combination of words would put the pieces back where they had been. I turned around without a word that night. I said, "You already knew what you were doing." He pressed the heels of his hands against his eyes for a moment. When he dropped them, the tears were still there. "I can't fix it if you won't tell me where you are," he said. "I can't even bring the kids to see you." I looked at the man my son had become under the porch light of a place that was not home. I thought of the casserole cooling on the step 2 weeks earlier. I thought of the height marks on the old doorframe and the joint account and the will that no longer carried his name. "I'm right here," I said. "This is where I live now." He stood on the step a long time after that, the wind moving the tails of his coat, the lights of the parking lot reflecting in the wet on his face. He did not ask to come inside. I did not invite him. Eventually he turned and walked back toward the car parked under the bare maples. I watched until the taillights disappeared around the corner. Then I closed the door, climbed the stairs, and finished heating the soup. The apartment was quiet. The picture of the gap-toothed boy still sat on the windowsill. Outside, the trees moved in the dark and the river kept its slow course past the edge of town. I sat at the small table and ate. The night settled around the new walls as if it had always belonged there.